Welcome to Khanversations. I'm Muqtedar, your host, and today I'm going to talk to you and provide you with a crisis briefing. The relationship between Canada and India are spiraling into a major crisis, as things have unfolded in the past 24 hours. So today I'm going to try and identify what is really going on and try and provide some analysis. And I hopefully, as the crisis continues to unfold, I will frequently do more of these conversations as part of the crisis briefing series. Hopefully, things will get better. U.S. India-Canada relations are very important. Canada is a country that is part of the G7. It is a core of the Western countries, a major force in US and allies' support of Ukraine, and also an important country with which India has had good relations for a very long time. So what has really happened? The crisis has been triggered by a statement made by Prime Minister Trudeau in the parliament, in which he accuses India of potentially being responsible for the assassination of a Sikh Canadian, Hardeep Singh Nijjar, who is a leader of the Sikh community. He is also a president of a Gurdwara, a Sikh religious institution, place of worship. So he's not just a community leader, but he also has connections to the religious aspect of Canadian Sikhs. But he has been a very vocal critique of India and an advocate for Sikh separatism, the Khalistan movement, which since 1980s has been demanding a separate state for Sikhs in the state of Punjab in India. Just like in India, the Sikhs constitute about 2% of the Canadian population. There are about 770,000 Sikhs, 2.1% of the Canadian population. They are a very important economic and political force, very closely aligned with Trudeau's party. And for the last 20, 25 years, they have been advocating for a separatist state. The separatist movement is more or less dead in India. The Sikh community in India has suffered significantly as a result of the movement, the terrorism it triggered in the 1980s, including the assassination of India's Prime Minister Indira Gandhi and the subsequent program, genocidal violence against Sikhs in Delhi that lasted for several days, in which thousands of Sikhs have been killed. So that movement is more or less dead in India, but it is alive in the diaspora. And so you will occasionally see Sikhs protesting in Australia, in the United Kingdom, in Canada. And recently there was even vandalism of Indian embassies in London, Hindu temples in Australia, and a consulate in San Francisco. And of course, there are lots and lots of attacks on Indian embassy and consulates in Canada. But a few months ago, Hardeep Singh Nijjar was shot dead outside a Gurdwara in Canada. And since then, the Canadian intelligence agencies who have been investigating have been hinting that perhaps the Indian embassy or Indian government is involved in the assassination of this. The Indian government obviously says this is rubbish. India is a democracy. India does not indulge in assassinations and such violence abroad. So Trudeau in the parliament yesterday basically alleged that India, or rather accused India, of being potentially involved in the assassination of a Canadian citizenship, and he's calling upon the Indian government to cooperate with Canada in getting to the bottom of it. So basically, he wants the Indian government to help him investigate India's, let me say that again, Trudeau wants the Indian government to cooperate with Canada as Canada investigates the role of Indian government in the assassination of Hardeep Singh Nijjar. He also claims that when he spoke with Prime Minister Narendra Modi in India, he did bring up this issue and requested that the Indian government cooperate with Canada to get to the bottom of this issue. I guess he wants to find out who the assassins are, who the killers are, whether the Canadians or whether they're Indian intelligence agents, and he wants to, I guess, bring some justice because he must be under a lot of pressure from the Sikh Canadian community to take some action. The Indian side says that Prime Minister Modi responded by rejecting this idea and saying this is all rubbish. And in fact, India has their own grievances against Canada. They feel that the Canadian government is become a refuge for anti-India terrorists, for the Khalistan separatist movement. And so the Indian government is demanding that Canada stop supporting terrorism against India, and stop giving so much of freedom and opportunity to anti-India activism in Canada. And Canada is becoming a hub of the Sikh separatist movement. One of the accusations against Nijjar is that he was trying to organize a referendum, an illegal referendum in India, in order to show that there are lots of Sikhs, both in India, in Australia, in Canada, and the United Kingdom and elsewhere in the world, who are seeking a separate homeland for the Sikhs. But what is interesting is that I do want to point out that in the past few months, some anti-India activists and terrorists living in Pakistan had been killed, were shot and killed. And while the Pakistanis have accused Indians and Indian intelligence agencies of hiring killers in Pakistan to kill them, there were some allegations that Indians were directly involved. The Indian government obviously rejected all those allegations about killing anti-India, pro-Kashmir terrorists. And also, I think one of them, I don't remember fully, may have been associated with the Khalistan movement, who was killed in Pakistan. But in India, a lot of commentators were taking great pride on the fact that India was now a powerful country, and under Prime Minister Modi was going and striking the enemies of India wherever they are. And so I will not completely rule out the possibility that India was indeed involved in some way in the killing of Najjar. But it's also quite possible that he was killed as a result of some other reasons, business-related reasons that have nothing to do with his political activism. So we don't know much about the investigations. Prime Minister Trudeau has offered no evidence so far about why he thinks India is involved in the assassination of Najjar. Not only that, the language he used in the parliament suggests that he's not fully confident. He says there is a potential connection between India and the assassination. So, it is obvious that that while investigations may be hinting at India's involvement, Canada does not have evidence. Or is it possible that they are holding the evidence back as a leverage against the Indian government and in order to get more cooperation out of the Indian government? I don't know. So Canada, not only is Trudeau raising this in the parliament, and it will be discussed in the parliament today and I guess tomorrow in the Canadian parliament, but he also expelled a very senior Indian diplomat. And he has announced that he has shared this information with France, Great Britain, and the United States, with other G7 countries from the West. So he has internationalized this issue. It has now it could become a multilateral issue rather than a bilateral issue between India and Canada if the United States or Britain or France were to make any comment about this crisis. If this crisis is not cut off, nipped in the bud, so to speak, it could become a huge diplomatic debacle for Canada as well as India. These days, Trudeau is being treated by Asian powers as someone that they can really bully and insult. If you remember, in the Bali meeting of G20, there was a video that went viral of Chinese President Xi Jinping scolding Trudeau for sharing some confidential conversations that they had with the Canadian media. And you could see it was as if the principal of a school was scolding a schoolboy for breaking some rule. So I think Canada has this perception that it's not that important, powerful, and a weak country, and so these days, increasingly, Asian powers feel that they can. There was a lot of mockery of Trudeau during the G20 summit. The Indian media kept suggesting that Prime Minister Modi was treating him as if he and Canada were nothing. He was sidelined. Not only that, but his plane had some problems, so he was stuck on the tarmac for a few hours, couldn't leave India on schedule. And all of this was being mocked in Indian press. So Trudeau is getting a lot of heat from Indian politics and Indian media already before this crisis began. So already you could see the momentum, and Indian social media also is going aggressively after Mr. Trudeau. So what's happening is that this crisis could become a poly-crisis on multiple issues, and it is not in the interest of either India or Canada for it to become such. I can understand the pressures that the Prime Minister Trudeau is because of the importance of the Sikh Canadian community, but he also has to now balance international interests with domestic interest. I do want to say that India has also rejected these allegations in very clear terms, saying this is ridiculous, this is a motivated comment, and not true. And they have also expelled a senior Canadian diplomat in a tit-for-tat response. Now, the question really critical to this all is, what is the evidence that Trudeau has, and is he going to share it publicly in the parliament, in the media, and has he already shared with the United States, France, and Britain, and will they, based on that intelligence, reach out to India diplomatically or in public? Trudeau, if he is constantly being insulted and feels political pressure, will ask the G7 allies to publicly vindicate his claims, and that will be a further escalation of this conflict. I also feel that because Canada is part of the Five Eyes, this intelligence cooperation between five English-speaking countries, Canada, Britain, New Zealand, Australia, and the United States, it's quite possible that whatever intelligence the Canadian intelligence has about this affair is already available to at least those four other countries. I want to give a little background on US Canada-India relations, which could be impacted if things go really bad and diplomatic relations are broken off. I hope it doesn't happen. The trade between Canada and India is about $8 billion. It's quite balanced, 4 billion exports from Canada, 4 billion exports from India. India provides mostly IT services, and one of the biggest exports of Canada to India is lentils. That I found quite interesting. 40% of all international students that come to Canada are Indians, 340,000 this year alone. So Canada has a lot to lose by pursuing a diplomatic policy towards India, which could upset all of this. And not to mention that 1.4 million Indians live in Canada, which is about 4% of the Canadian populations. So Canada is deeply intertwined with India and the Indian diaspora. So Trudeau needs to handle this with as carefully as possible. And on top of that, this is an election season in India, and Prime Minister Modi is using his stature as a global leader, etc., as a way to offset some of the negative things, such as high unemployment, high inflation in India, to essentially win the election in 2024. So Canada might inadvertently give Prime Minister Modi an opportunity to flex muscles on the international system for domestic consumption. So by acting tough with Canada, he could tell the world that, look, we are now a major world power. We can treat Western powers as they are, weaker than us. And so Trudeau should be careful that he does not become one of the slogans in Prime Minister Modi's domestic election campaign. As far as India is concerned, this is a very serious test for India's diplomacy too. India could could take advantage of it for domestic reasons, but it could undermine India's relations with G7. And I am sure they're having an all behind the scenes dialogue with the United States on this issue. There is a problem in the United States too. The San Francisco Indian consulate there was vandalized by Sikhs. So India has a Khalistan problem with most of its Western allies, Australia and India from the Quad, Britain and Canada from the G7 countries. So we'll see what happens and how well these two countries manage their relationship. It is in their interest to handle this behind the camera and not in the public side. And quickly resolve the matter. And I hope that does happen. But I will be keeping an eye on this. And if there are new developments, I will comment on them. So until next time, this is Muqtedar Khan for Khanversations. If you found this crisis briefing helpful, please subscribe to Khanversations, like the video. Don't forget to share it, ring the bell icon, and support Khanversations by joining it and becoming a member of Khanversations. Take care until next time.